The podcast has made it to the Big D, and we don't mean desert. Welcome to Snap Judgments. They're brought to you by Buyers Auto. That is Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Ohio State practicing again at AT&T Stadium, where we are right now, deep inside this wonderful structure. It's loud in here.
Yeah, so if it's echoey, sorry, that's why.
Yeah, they're practicing right now. We had an open viewing period, the first one with Ohio State since August, so we're going to get into that. Bill, we have to start, obviously, with Marvin Harrison Jr. not being in uniform, and I don't know why that would be a surprise to anyone.
Yeah, it wasn't surprising. He was wearing his jersey, but then he was wearing a hoodie underneath his jersey and was riding the exercise bike in a rather leisurely manner while the rest of the team was practicing and going through some stretching. So clearly he's not going to play here. He's not practicing here. No one thought otherwise. But I mean, I don't know. At least he's here, right? You didn't have to be here with the team. I think it's good that he's here with the team. But anyone who was holding out hope, I don't know why you would be, but I think the dream is dead.
The guy looked depressed. I was looking at him through the camera.
Far away from him.
I was looking at him through the camera. It's a fairly long lens. I can get there. I don't think this is what he wants to do, but I think he knows it's what he has to do, as opposed to Lathan Ransom, who's not playing for injury and walking around and being, talkative with the guys. I think this hurts him that he knows that it's not the right decision to play in this game. And Ohio State has to move on, obviously, and he has to deal with it. But I don't think it's what he wants to do. I'm telling you, I looked into his eyes, man, and I was like, that guy looks unhappy.
Well, he's a football player. He does love to play. We talked about that in the build-up to this game. It couldn't just be about love of the game. Unfortunately, it has to be a financial decision for Marvin Harrison Jr. Your point, Berm, was right. He could have torn his ACL on Friday night and still been a top 10 pick. But why risk any part of that slotted guaranteed money? This is the right decision, I think, for Marvin Harrison Jr., even though I think we would all agree we'd love to see him play one more time and end his career on a high note. We went through this 2 years ago with the Rose Bowl. Marvin was the direct beneficiary of Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson not playing at wide receiver. So I thought we'll get into the rest of those guys who were dressed or not dressed for Ohio State, but you saw Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss going through the start of the line for Ohio State. Here you go. Here's the opportunity. I think that's a big deal.
We're going to get run over by a bus. There's a lot of moving parts around here. No, yeah, it is a huge opportunity for these young receivers. One I'm excited to watch. When we talk about them, and I wanted to make this point because I saw him on the practice field. I was like, oh yeah, we don't talk about Jaden Bauer enough. He is here. He is higher on that pecking order, I think. So when you were watching him go through, I think it might have been Emeka and then Jaden, which is probably worth pointing out because we get so excited about the younger guys like Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss that we sometimes forget about the older guys who are on the roster who are going to get probably an elevated opportunity in this game too. But it'll be a nice glimpse of the future, I think. And, I think it'll look similar to how it looked in the Rose Bowl a couple years ago. We saw Marvin and Emeka kind of emerge for the first time. So I would hope that that's exciting, even if it is a bummer that you're not going to see one of the best players to ever play here play his final game as a Buckeye.
Yeah, and to expect it to look too much like the Rose Bowl, where you had a full season.
No, it's going to look exactly like
where you had CJ Stroud.
That's a bold P right there.
Playing the 13th game of his season and unleashing all hell on the Utah.
Is Missouri going to play a running back, a corner in this game?
I don't believe they
TBD.
are, but their All-American corner and his Rackstraw will not play. Yeah. So they certainly don't have the depth that's great. But Devin Brown, I thought, just looked good. Throwing the ball, him and Lincoln Keno's both. Now, again, as we said on this morning's daily, we haven't watched Ohio State practice since August, but they both look pretty comfortable throwing the ball, obviously on air, but the ball's on the money. It's got some zip on it, and Devin Brown is the unquestioned starter heading into this game. And again, Ohio State on Tuesday morning, is it Tuesday? Mm-hmm. Went through, it seems like they're making sure people know it. So I think that's important, and they're leaning into it, and you can see it rubbing off because he looks very comfortable out there.
The ankle was still taped up for Devin Brown, so no huge bulky brace. He had said when we talked to him a couple weeks ago that he felt 100%, but they're still obviously taking some precautions with that. But it's him, and I think it's even in 15 minutes, very limited sample size to work with. And as Berm said, throwing routes on air, it's a reminder that throughout the course of this month, Tristan Gebbia did not take any of those reps when they were throwing on air. All of them went to Devin Brown and Lincoln Kienholz, and of those, it was probably 2/3 at least for Devin Brown. So that's, if you were counting that over the course of the month, the opportunity that's been provided for both of them is significant, but I think especially for Devin Brown, the showcase, the amount of reps, it's different than he would have ever received at any point previously. certainly in training camp, we were seeing 50-50 in the split squads, stuff that Ohio State was trying to do to work through the battle. I mean, they tried to double up the reps, but that's still not quite the same thing as here you go, rep after rep, lead the line, and we'll see how he does with that on Friday night. But that's stretching that over the course of several weeks. That's a larger body of practice work.
He was already excited about that when we talked to him back in Columbus, and I think at that point they'd only had like 1 or 2 bowl practices under their belts, and he was already talking about how big of a difference it was to just know you're getting all of or like 90% of the first team reps, not having to look over your shoulder in practice, not wondering what it means, like if you misfire on a throw, right? I think there's a lot of freedom that comes with that, which we talked about for the last month or so. And I mean, we're at the point now where we're a couple days away from the game. I just want to see how it translates to the field for Devin Brown, because I do think, if you watch him over the course of the season, there's a lot to like. There's some stuff where you're like, I don't know if that's really it. But I think this opportunity will allow him to bring out the best of him, whatever that looks like.
So we'll see. We know he's not going to be throwing to Marvin Harrison, but looks like the rest of the cast around Ohio State could be pretty close to the best version they could field right now after all the transfer portal decisions, NFL draft opt-ins, opt-out. JT Tuimoloau was in uniform. Travion Henderson was in uniform. Cade Stover was in full uniform. Tommy Eichenberg was going through drills. Outside of Lathan Ransom with the injury, and Marvin with what appears to be an official opt-out. Pretty much the rest of the team was out there. Mike Hall, and that's, I don't know. We'll see what that means by the end of the week. But if you couldn't play physically, which is a situation we thought Tommy Eichenberg and Cade Stover might fall into, they were practicing in the capacity that we were allowed to watch.
Of course, Tommy also practiced fully and didn't play against Michigan State or Minnesota, so you don't know if that's going to really matter. The guy just loves being around his teammates. And I think the interesting thing is the running back situation. Bill was asking about on this morning's podcast daily, like, where would Xavier Johnson line up? And he was with the wide receivers exclusively from what we saw. Well, running back is just Travion Henderson and Dallin Hayden and T.C. Caffey, the walk-on who had a big run for a touchdown against Wisconsin a year ago. So might be an opportunity for him to sort of take on that Mayan Williams, Chip Trainum role of the bigger back, because he's a meatball part.
That's like a big part of this game plan, because I was thinking that when I was going back through and watching all of Devin Brown's rushing stuff, they were doing like a lot of lead runs with Chip Trainum blocking for Devin, and it's like you take Chip Trainum and Mayan Williams off the roster, who does that? And maybe it's like Patrick Gerd, but that kind of telegraphs it if you put Patrick Gerd in the backfield. I guess it would telegraph it too if you put T.C. Caffey back there. It's like, what's this guy doing?
You got 3 backs. I mean,
but like Dallin Hayden and Travion Henderson aren't going to do that, right? Or at least I don't think do it effectively. So I don't know if that limits Ohio State's run game or not, or if you can throw somebody different like a T.C. Caffey in there.
If Dallin Hayden does it, I'm going to have some serious questions.
He's going to scream.
I'm going to lose my mind if supposedly the weaknesses as a blocker, like, you know what? That doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
But I am kind of excited about that. We'll talk about it in the build-up. Like, Dallin Hayden's going to play a decent amount in this game. I'd like to see that. Like, we know and we've seen in other situations when he's been out there why Ohio State might feel a little reticence with, you have to be able to pick up a blitz and throw a block. And, like, that's clearly not the strength of Dallin Hayden's game. I'm not arguing that it is. But sometimes you got to go out there in a game and actually do it when it matters. And, if you... We'll evaluate it however it goes, good or bad or indifferent, but he's going to have to play in this game. That's it. As Berm said, there's 3 guys in that line and then a couple scout team walk-ons that aren't going to factor in. They don't have their own jersey on right now. So that's a big opportunity. I'd love to see Dallin Hayden make the most out of it.
The scout team is interesting just because we see guys in this setting that we don't really get a chance to know what they're doing. I think it's interesting at wide receiver, for example, that it's Kojo Antwi and Keon Grays as the scout wide receivers, as opposed to Noah Rogers and Bryson Rogers, who I would think physically are a little bit more like Luther Burden than Kojo and Theo East than Keon and Kojo are. But like those guys probably factor more into the game plan for Ohio State if it gets down to that point. So it's interesting to watch that. But these sort of 15-minute windows really don't show us much.
No.
I thought seeing the offensive line, we did not see Matt Jones at center, and while we were out there, doesn't mean it's off the table. Certainly not. But again, those are the things coming into the day that we were trying to scope out.
I think it's probably worth mentioning as we talk about other guys who were practicing. Everyone's in full pads. Tommy only had shoulder pads on. I don't know what that means, but it stuck out to me that he didn't have the leg pads on. So I don't know if they end up going full contact later on today or tomorrow. maybe that's not something he takes part of. But the fact that he was even out here with shoulder pads on, I think, is a sign that maybe he might try to give it a go. But I would caution people a little bit on thinking that Tommy's definitely going to play in this game.
What's the most interesting thing you saw in 15 minutes?
I mean, probably just like the appearance of JT Tuimoloau in pads, because I was uncertain of whether or not he'd be here. Well, not be here, but be a part of practice. Like if he was doing the Marvin thing, I guess I wouldn't have been terribly surprised by that. So he was fully dressed. He was going through individual drills, like had his helmet on and stuff. So that was probably the thing I took notice of immediately.
I think it was Brandon Inniss' place in the line. I mean, I know that little things like that, but being out there next to Emeka Egbuka, next to Xavier Johnson, next to Tommy Eichenberg like that, I think that means something. I don't know if it means everything. I don't know if it means that much about the future of the wide receiver room, but Brandon Inniss, knowing him as a high school recruit, knowing what they expected out of him, that's not surprising that he's emerging as like the vocal leader, sort of the heartbeat of that room. We are really, we don't know if we're getting a bunch of background noise, but there's a lot of things happening around us right now.
Yeah, because the Cotton Bowl is a big deal, and they're getting ready for it on Friday night. I was also going to say Brandon Inniss because Brian Hartline, during that 15-minute viewing period, we go down there, the running routes on air, and they decide to have an impromptu one-handed catch showcase. Brandon Inniss' ball skills are insane. It's not just like reeling in a one-handed catch, but then he'll like flip it over his shoulder and juggle it in the air and then no-look pass it to the managers. I would really like to see, there's another guy that falls into this category. I'm not trying to go back to the exhibition. Well, I'd like to see a full game for Brandon Inniss and what that could look like. I know it's early, but I would have said the same thing 2 years ago at Marvin. Like, hey, talked about this guy a lot in spring practice or in training camp. His name's getting called in a lot of scrimmage situations. Let's see more of that. And it's hard to ask for that in the middle of the year, like take away reps from a healthy Emeka or a Marvin or Julian Fleming, but that's not the situation that Ohio State is in anymore. So you have to go out and sink or swim a little bit in this game. And he's got to be one of the most interesting people to watch on Friday night.
And Brandon was the only one of those four receivers in the class of 2023 that didn't enroll early. So like we haven't had a full chance to really see what he can do. He got one catch on the year and it's a 57-yard touchdown. Like the kid is a baller. And I think you could almost use him in that Xavier Johnson role a little bit.
Backfield.
Yeah, he played quarterback in high school. Like you can do a lot of things with him. He played Wildcat quarterback. So I think that he's a player that you just have to kind of look for.
Do you think Emeka could play outside some? Which could
that was the impression I had.
Stats?
So to me, like the impression of Brandon moving up in the line was that Emeka may be playing the outside role because Julian's gone. Yeah. Someone else is going to have to be out there. So
someone who can block.
Right. And Emeka would be the most trusted blocker of that group. So I think that opens the door for Inniss to play a lot more in the slot. But you have Carnell on the opposite side of Emeka Egbuka, and then you move around the Swiss Army knife and Xavier Johnson.
Well, it's getting closer. We're here. We're at AT&T Stadium. Buckeyes practicing again. They've practiced the last couple days, and we'll have another viewing period tomorrow, Wednesday. We'll have Ryan Day's press conference on Thursday, and then the game is finally here. It's great to be back talking to you all and talking with these guys about the Buckeyes as we get ready for one more opportunity on Friday night to cover a game. It's the Cotton Bowl against Missouri. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. These have been Snap Judgments. They're brought to you by Byers Auto. Talk to you later.